I'm Paulo. I'm a senior developer here at Admios, and today I'm gonna talk about Strapi. So strap on, really bad joke, and let's get in. So what is Strapi? Strapi is what's called a headless CMS. Like all CMS, it is a product which enables you to manage content for your application without having to code or to code little of it. Examples of it are, WordPress, Joomla, etc., etc. But what setups Strapi different from those is that it's a headless CMS. What is a headless CMS? A headless CMS is a type of architecture in which you only provide the backend and the administration page or the management or the place called the back office, but the front end or the front facing application that the customer see is not provided in the product. You have to build it yourself. Why? Because it has some advantages. It has advantages that if your content is not tightly coupled with the front end, so when you use a headless CMS, you can provision the content to be managed, to be interacted with via other applications, many web applications, and other type of applications that, for example, if you use WordPress, you cannot do easily because it is tied to the front end, which is on the web. And this enable a lot of advantages like reducing the cost of hosting and development because it's just a backend. You can just simply modify and provision it. And also the time to market is easier to schedule in production your content manager because you can just deliver your content manager and then deliver the different views in which the customers are going to access to your content. It's easier to use because users or the managers that are going to be interacting and producing content, they don't have to worry about like the placement of the content or anything. They just need to add the content and then someone else is going to take care of that. And at the same time, because of this, it is scalable because since it is simple headless, you can replicate it into multiple instances in your deployment, or you can scale it vertically, and it's not gonna cause harm. Like to do that in something like WordPress is really complicated because you're basically gonna end up having multiple websites that you take turns in handling you. But it has some disadvantages. Like for starters, since it's not a building solution with the front end, you're gonna have to handle multiple services, multiple deployments at the same time. You're gonna need to handle your deployment for your backend, and then you're gonna need to handle your deployment for your front end. And doesn't have organization signs, like for example, you don't have like links or menus or anything that you need to interact with. That's something that needs to be provided by the front end developer or the product that's going to act as the front end. And also, it doesn't have presentation because only possess the content. It's not gonna tell you. It's not gonna handle how the content renders or formatting and etc. Because those are the jobs of the front end. So let's get started with some code. Um, this is a typical project. How it looks for stuff is just a normal Node.js application. You can see it here. Right now, I'm building the project. One of the downsides of Strap is that it takes a little bit more than your normal Node.js application to build because you need to install a lot of things. And in the meantime, I'm gonna give you a walkthrough over everything you do. Is just you have your normal application. You have your package JSON, which is basically the same as any project. Like if you are comfortable with JavaScript and with Node, you will be able to handle it. What differs is how things are managed in the content, which we are gonna see in a little bit after this. Um, for example, here you have a configuration folder where you can configure, for example, the database you're going to use. Strapi supports different databases. By default, it uses SQLite, which is for presentations like here right now. But you can also use MongoDB. You can also use SQL Server, MySQL. You can use Azure Cosmos DB. You can use uh, AWS DynamoDB. You can use a lot of database solutions that is common. And the community is always building a lot of other clients for you to use. Um, you can also configure your service configuration. You can configure your authentication, right now the default application is KWT, but we will see later, Strapi supports a lot of application authentication providers and a lot of authentication modes like OpenID, and you can configure multiple posts to handle a lot of things. For example, there is the for hosting, but you can have multiple services inside Strapi that handle different interactions at the same time. Now, while this finished, anyone wants have any questions that would like me to ask before we move on?
We are all muted, so I don't think we can ask questions for now.
Okay, so let's give it a little till NPM finishes.
Does Strapi has some sort of TypeScript support?
Not yet. It is in development. They are working also on a version. There's a Go version that is being developed for Strapi too, but TypeScript has been a requested feature, but it's still not in development. There are some guys over there to use for you to use Strapi with TypeScript, but I don't recommend it because Strapi is plugin based, and you will basically gonna have to do that for each plugin. For example, if you're going to integrate with GraphQL, as we're gonna see soon, you're basically gonna have to modify the GraphQL plugin to be able to be handled in your TS config. So that is a bit difficult. As you can see here, for example, we have an API folder which is going to be filled with the API documentation and configuration soon. And that's basically it. It's just a normal NPM project, but what it offers is that it has a no-code, low-code solution for you to build your endpoints and your content, how it's going to manage. If only the NPM was a little faster, I can use that with that. Let's give it 1 minute to see if it finishes.
I have a question, actually, Paulo. So how is this repository connected to the CMS for the front end? Where is that connection happening?
So this is the CMS. You are going to see now that the content is managed through some configurations that will get generated once it's created. But with the front end, what Strapi provides is a web API that you can use to integrate with your front end. There's also like you can use set up endpoints for each of your content collections, and that way you can interact with it from the front end. That because the best way to look at Strapi and headless CMS as a whole is basically as backends. Backends that are low code and they are configurable, and they are designed to have a cPanel, but not like a presentation layer. That's basically it.
And so does it provide you sort of a visual layer, sort of like WordPress does, where you can like move components, drag and drop, that sort of thing? Yes. Okay, but that's what will get generated with once the npm is installed, and you can actually see it locally. It's not like something that you find on the browser itself, correct?
Yes, like you're gonna run you run the Strapi server, and that way you can enter the admin side where you can configure everything.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's also like you can install like add-ons that allow you to configure other stuff. Like I'm gonna show you how to configure Swagger, that's going to generate automatically the documentation for your API, and how to configure integrations with for email or configure an SMTP server, and to configure GraphQL, which is all done via the UI with the use of what they call Strapi plugins. Okay, finally we are out. So we first need to move here, and we go here. You see, you can have multiple like workspaces at the same time for like you can have like basically multiple applications in the same server. So here I'm going to create the first administrator, but for some reason this is not doing anything. Maybe something went off in the administration. Says one more thing, create administration. Something is not going well. Let me back. Create this administration. Let me reveal.
The backend console did not compile. It's
Yes,
having a 404 for the what's it called, the backend.
yes, that's what I'm saying. Mm. Let me see why that happens. It's a problem with working with Node. Like sometimes NPM just wants you to look back to tell you that now it's building that admin UI because it is supposed to be built when you just run start the first time. But that's how things happen. Okay, now we can things are gonna be fine. So let's start by creating the super admin user. Then create it with one, and I'm gonna use password, and let's get started. Ah, I need to do. I forgot about it. Okay, let's save this here, and now we are. So this is the admin panel where I can create everything. I'm gonna give you before we create our first collection. I'm gonna give you a walkthrough. Here in collection types, you can see the data you already have. For example, here by default, it creates a new collection which is called user. And here you can see the plugins, which we're gonna explore a bit. The plugins that you have already installed, the marketplace where you can look for other plugins, and an administration panel where you can use look the plugins you already have installed. But now let's get started. We're gonna create a new collection, and this here we're gonna add a new one. There are two types of content that you can create here. You can create collection types, which are content like container for list of collections, but you can also create single types, which are containers for use one record, like for example, a configuration. But we are going to create one. First, we need to simply see here, we can see, for example, uh, how it works. You see the fields which you can set up. You can configure how they're gonna look when you call the endpoint and other stuff that you can configure. So right now I'm not seeing here the button to create a new content, but I'm gonna click here and see if it is that I'm not having super admin control. Okay, I'm super admin here. Okay, and let's get it here. So the auto reload is required to use oh, I need to do a control S5. I forgot about that. Oh, I know what's happening. I started in production mode. That's why I cannot modify it. If you want to use the UI for creating new collections and configuring stuff, you need to start in develop mode. So let's do that. So run. Let's do that now. Okay, now things should be available to me. Move over again. Okay, and now I should be able to create my first content type. So let's create a new collection. In this collection, we're gonna call it categories. You can see here basic settings, you set up the name, but also there's some settings that you can set up here. Like for example, you can set up the connection name, which is the one that is going to get used on the API as the endpoint. You can also set it up as a draft if you want to. You want to say you can create content that it won't be available directly, like content that you're modifying and still not approved for production. You can create it as a draft and other stuff. But let's get to the basics first, and we're gonna create this collection. The first thing that we're gonna have is gonna add a field type text. We're gonna call it name. And we can in advanced setting, we're gonna set it up as a required field, and we're gonna also set it up as a unique field because we don't want repeated categories. And with that, we finish. That we have our name. Now we're gonna save, and with this, Strapi is going to reveal. It's going to generate the configuration necessary and the source file necessary for the project to work. And now we see you have our collection here. Now, if I want to go to my collection, here I can add new fields. I can add new records for my collection. I'm gonna add one that is going to be called call it sports. And with this now you can see I save the content as a draft, but it's still not available in the API. We're gonna show you how it works later when we start connecting to the API. But for now, we're gonna just publish it. And that way, if you go to categories, we are going to see our data. Now, how does this look on API? So we are gonna copy this URL here. 1 second. And we're gonna open a new screen. We're just gonna do a simple request to categories. And you can see I have status forbidden because this is authenticated. And with that in mind, we are going to make this security settings more exciting. We are going to set up. We're going to go to roles here. Just for this presentation, we're going to look for, where is it? My bad, it is here. We're going to come here and we are going to add we're going to add permission that allow me to access this collection anonymous. I believe it is here in one place. Implementation, no, here, public, up here. Institution, no, it's not here. I think it is here. Let's go to that. Okay. Here, I'm looking for the anonymous, which I cannot find. Maybe because I haven't here. Let me go here. Okay, now I'm here in the public. I'm going to save, and this should allow me to query the API without issue. Okay, now you can see here, you can see the content I created. It will tell you the custom field, but it also will create an automatically ID field. You can see the date that it was published, that it was created, and when was the last time it was updated. Right now in Strapi, it will use numeric auto-increment IDs automatically. There's a new feature coming out that will allow you to set up your own primary key, but for now, that's what we have. Now, we created our first collection, and now I want to create a new collection, which is called articles, and this collection of articles is going to be grouped by category, so I need to have a relationship between collections. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new collection, which is called articles. And here I'm gonna add a field, which is called title. And this is going to be simple short text because it's just a simple title, but I'm going to make it a required field. And now I'm going to add another field, which is called content. Now this is the content of the article. It is also required. And it is, if you know, it is a rich text field, which means that I can add formatting and all those stuff. And with this, I'm going to add another field now. The next field that I'm going to add is a relationship. This way, I can set up a relationship between articles and collect in categories. And here I'm going to say that article has one category. That way we can have a relationship of one to many with categories. The fields for category, you can put it here. You can, and also you can set it up if you want that an article can have many categories. And that way you can have one article each. And finally, you can say that category has many articles if you want to have a one to many relationship. And as well, you can have multiple categories having multiple articles. For simplicity, I'm going to create it here. That one category has many articles. And with that, I'm going to add another field here. I think that we don't need enough. Oh well, yes, we need one last field, which is the author of the field. By here, we're gonna add it as an email, which is gonna be the email of the author. And now I'm going to make this fire as well. And we're gonna finish. Now here you can see my collection of articles. And now we are going to save so it gets to publish and we can see the fruits of our labor. Oh, we have an error, but it's gonna show us what happened. Let's see what happened. Oh, okay. I think it's happening now. Weird, never happened to me before this one. Let us update and see what's happening. Okay, now we have our articles, which means that I can create a new article. And I'm going to call it Sports Are Fun. And here I have my rich text field, and I'm going to use black Sports Are Fun. And I'm gonna make it big. I think I can just put it here like that. And I can switch to preview. This is waiting in Markdown, and now I have my article. And with this, I can see I now need to add, I'm gonna add a category, which is going to be sports. And that way, I need to add an article, and I'm going to add my stuff. And now with this, I can save. And I'm gonna publish. And now I'm going to make my article. I'm going to make it public so I can see it. I'm going to set it off here, and I'm going to save. And if I go to articles here, I should be able to see what article I created. And here you can see it. No, I'm gonna beautify later so you can see better how this looks, but you can get the gist of it. It is just a JSON body. You can see here that the content is written on Markdown. And you can see that I get the reference of a category. Now, we all know that we like our API endpoints to have as smaller payload as possible. One solution for this is GraphQL, but before we get into GraphQL, I'm going to show you how you can configure what can be seen by the consumers of your API. They're gonna come here, we're gonna come here, and we're gonna go to configure the view. And here you can set up how things are gonna look. For example, here I don't want to see the full category. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit here, and I don't need to edit here. I'm going to come here, and I'm going to edit this here, and I'm gonna see if I can find this field to have a placeholder, or to put it just like this name. And I'm going to delete one thing. I don't want to see the order on the font, so I'm going to delete order, and I'm going to click save. Yes. And with this, if I go here and refresh, wait, I need to refresh here. I think I need to refresh on the Um, see, by this page here, you will be able to see it. Ah, I need to go here first, and if I say add new article, now I cannot see it here. But I also shouldn't be able to see it in the API. But for some reason I'm doing it now. Maybe there's something that I need to enable on the other side. But we're gonna focus on that later. Let's now see. Let's now get a look at how our code has changed. If we come here, you can see on API that two folders have been created: categories and articles. If you go to controller, you will see a controller file that doesn't have anything because the Strapi takes care of most of it, but it exists so you can add custom code. They're not gonna get into custom code because that will greatly expand the time that we have, and we just have 20 minutes left. So let's just take a quick look, and then we're gonna go to documentation and GraphQL integration. So here you can see the model. If you come to the settings, these are JSON files that has the metadata of your model for your collection. And at the same time, you have this article.js, which is supposed to be like the database adapter for you to read and write into the collection. It is using the same thing. You can see that you can configure. This is based on the lifecycle hook API of Strapi, which we will see later. And finally, if you go to services, this is like the business layer of your content. And here you can also add code, custom code to do stuff with your collection. Now I'm going to go to here again, and we're gonna go get a website to install new plugins. Now we only have two plugins. We have the content type builder, which is the one that we've been using to add new content collections, the new content types, and the media library, which is a lot. This is for you to upload your assets like your files, your images, your videos, any unstructured content that you wish to add in order to be displayed in your presentation layer in your front end. But if we go to the marketplace, we can see that we have other things that we can check out. For example, we are going to start with the documentation. This feature, what it does is that it adds Swagger to your content manager, so you can have API documentation. So we're going to download it, and we are going to review to see how it looks. Going to take a little bit. In the meantime, anyone has a question that I would like to get some answers about it? I'll see when it starts taking longer time. No, stopping my computer is a bit slow today. No one has any questions?
Yes, I do have. How customizable is the admin console?
So far, like you can set up a lot of stuff. Basically, you can create your own plugins. There is a guide in Strapi documentation for you to add your own plugins. For example, I myself, I'm working on a ERPC plugin for Strapi, which it doesn't have right now. But because it is usually used as a simple content manager, there are like you can usually get around with what they already offers. But most of the things that you can do is just create your own plugin, and that way you can influence the look and feel of the application. You can add new features, like for example, there's someone who created a plugin that basically allows you to have pop-up for your Strapi deployment. And as I say, I'm creating a gRPC plugin for Strapi, so that's basically what you can do. You need to keep in mind that the admin side is not supposed to be like your production. This is something that is supposed to be used by you during development time to like set up stuff. And you can also sometimes use it by, for example, if your content management process is simple, you can use it in production by your content contributors to creators to add new content. Let's say you have a news site, you could use this admin site to write your new articles. It's not recommended because it's not like the look and feel is not that good. But you can take in theory you could do it. Anyone has any other questions?
Well, in this case, I was more or less talking about the colors and the logo itself, because, for example, to create new kinds of collections, or say new, using this like the WP admin of WordPress, that's the direct parallel I'm thinking about.
Yeah, this is basically. Oh, I didn't download. Weird. But yeah, this is basically like the backup. This is what it is. I know that you can like there are themes. There are things that you can use, and you probably could be able to create your own theme. But I haven't dwelled on that part of the documentation, so I don't have a concrete answer for you. But I can tell you that you can do it. For some reason, it's not being able to install. I'm trying to figure out why. Mm-mm. It probably did. I just need to reveal myself. That's something that happens sometimes. As you can see here, I'm having the Strapi plugin documentation, which means that it did install. So after this is done, we are going to focus on installing, on restarting here. We're going to rebuild to make sure that everything went okay. So let's do that. Let's stop right here. Okay, looks like it works now. It says already installed, but now it doesn't install the GraphQL. Okay, I'm installing so because we are running out of time, so I can show you both and we can finish that and like answer a couple more questions and then this. Yeah, let's start. Should take longer. Please check your logs. Installing GraphQL. So let's give it a second and hope that everything goes fine.
Well, this is weird, because that looks like the problem you're having is with npm. That was happened also at the beginning, that npm is getting too slow for this.
You know, I'm disappointed but not surprised. It is npm in the end. Okay, in the meantime, while this is installed, let's go to the documentation flow. So right now you can see the configuration of this plugin, and if I come here, open documentation, I believe you're going to see a Swagger UI. Just like your own Swagger UI for your API, it is generated automatically. You can see information about this. It will tell you, oh, you can find all the article records. You can see information here about this, publish ad, no type date. This the initial setup is a bit rough. You need to like fine tune it yourself, but it is pretty good for an auto-generated code. Like you can basically publish this as a base integration. For example, here you can see like this endpoint of upload is part of the media content management plugin that I showed you earlier to add in your assets. But basically, you can see the entire API here to be managed however you wish. Another thing that I didn't show up, like there are other plugins that allow you to handle media types. For example, there's a popular plugin that allows you to manage the importation of CSV files, which works with the API. And when you have it installed, for example, here in the plus method, is around here. Okay, here you will be able to have another content type for CSV around here, so you can import CSV files and set it up, and also you can get content from your API as CSV. Now let's see if we already have GraphQL installed, which we should have. So we can see GraphQL and then move finish here. Let me try to search again. No, we don't have. Let's try it again. Any other questions you guys have so far?
Well, you could try turning it on and off again. That always works with computers.
Yeah, well, I I don't want to do it because I don't know if this thing's gonna take some time building it. So I'm trying to be safe here because it's
Well,
only
the point is that likely it's not rebuilding the console after installing GraphQL, and that's why it's not.
yeah, and it should be there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rebuild it myself. I'm gonna rebuild it myself and see how it is. Because GraphQL is the final part. Is the final part. Actually, one of the things that Strapi is one of the most popular headless CMS is because it has a seamless integration with GraphQL that everyone likes. There are other headless CMS in the market, like for example, Squidex, which is one built in .NET. There's another one which is called Lambda, I think, which is built in Go. And there's another one which is called WordPress Headless, which is basically a headless version of WordPress. And it's built, of course, in PHP. So let's go here again. I think it's the WordPress headless is called Wordless or something like that. I don't know if WordPress headless is called. So in case you guys want to look for it. Okay, now we have our GraphQL endpoint stuff. But for some reason I cannot see it here. It should be here. It should be available here. But I believe that if I come here and I say GraphQL, I should get access to the GraphQL UI. Okay, we have a playground here. We can see your docs. I'm going to use this one to get our articles. Let's try here, query, and let's add our font. And I'm going to add articles, and just like that. Let's see if it works. That one, let me type it. Oh, I need to remove it. I'm so rusty on GraphQL. I haven't used it in a while. Okay, field articles, I must have a oh yes, let's just show the title and content. Let's see how it is.
Title with a capital T.
Yes, title and capital. And you can see here that we have our GraphQL title. Now we have GraphQL, we have Swagger, we have our API. Last thing I'm going to show you, but we're not going to implement it here because it's a bit complicated, is that you can set up your authentication providers for different things. Like, for example, here you can enable your authentication for AWS Meetup, for Discord, for Facebook, GitHub, Google, etc., etc. Each time you want to enable one, you just come here and you set up your client ID and your client secret and your callback URL for your authentication, and that's it. And also it's come built in, but you can also create your own custom provider and it will be installed as a plugin. Right now, for example, I've seen people creating another one for Azure to use Azure Active Directory integrated directly with Strapi. And other things that are in the marketplace. Marketplace is not like this is the building apps, but you can see, for example, I think it's here. You see, let me show you in the Strapi website where there is a lot of plugins that will allow you to have lots of stuff that you can do. See,
And I have a question, Paulo. What would be the pricing of this? Like, to which extent is it free versus paying?
so I believe that the pricing is just that they have a cloud version that they host it for yourself, and you can do everything you want. But it is open source and free for you. You can set it up however you want. This is like for that, like for your cloud application. But if you want to set it up, you can just build it yourself. That is free of charge and license. I was looking for the plugins. Let me, I think it's, I'm looking for the documentation. Okay, here you are. So we there's some plugins here. Okay, I owe you finding the third party plugin because I think that there's only the first party plugin. So thank you. I'm sorry if we took too long waiting for NPM to run. You know, it's kind of the things that you have to deal with working as a JavaScript developer. If anyone else have other questions that would like me to answer, otherwise we are done here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paulo.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
That was
you.
amazing. Very cool to see how
Thank
that
you,
whole thing
man.
worked.
Yeah, it works great. Well, I do have one more question. Yeah. In the backend, that backend that you presented, is there a way for users to have only access to certain models? For example, this user does not have access to articles, and this other user does not have access to products, and that was one of the reasons why I am not using Strapi for more stuff. I want to know if that's possible to do.
Yes, actually I'm ashamed that I didn't show it up because yes, basically you can do it here. Let me show you. If you come to
Yeah, I think you showed something with the roles, no, for each user.
basically set it up here. Roles. You can create your own role. Like for example, there is a role here for editors, which is like basically you can create like this role. What it does is that you allow users to create content, but only the editor can publish it. That's basically what it does.
Excellent. That's what I wanted to know.
You can,
Permissioning.
yeah. And you can also like integrate, like if you use a provider, you can integrate like with permission, for example, from Active Directory. And you can also assign permissions to individual users based on their roles. And I haven't seen it here. Let me see. You can create here users, and this way you can set up a role for them. But I need to get you back on it. Like you can create types of users that only work for one role. Like you can have an endpoint that only creates like customer users or editors, etc. Like security is robust. It's not like you're not gonna have this like listing and locking of resources in an advanced security system, but it has like what you expect for a content manager. It has role management, user management, and authentication. There's also some advanced setting over here. Like you can, for example, you can enable that users can register in the application. You can enable a password reset. You can, for example, enable the default role of authenticated user. For example, you can have the public role, which is the one that is for public APIs that you can only read, and you can just say like all users that register in the app start as public users. And also, if you have a system that doesn't require that like emails to be unique, like one user, like multiple users can share the same email, you can disable it here. And the other thing that I didn't show because it will be like configuration is a bit complicated. It is how to send emails, how to configure the SMTP service. But it's not really that hard. It's just like having to create one. It's not going to take a bit of time, but you can basically set up your email and you can create templates that you can use for different things. But that's basically it. The last thing I wanted to show you is components. But we run out of time. Maybe if we end up doing a Strapi part 2 someday, I can tell you that there's a lot of things. Like this is just like the basics. There are a lot of things about Strapi that makes it really powerful, even to the sense that some people are using it like a local microservice implementation. I've seen projects where instead of like having the microservice built up, they just have multiple Strapi instances and deal with different content and rules. There's even an integration with rule engines, so you can have business logic implemented without having to extend the code. And of course, you have a lot if you know your JavaScript, you can see the customization APIs. You can add your own rules and etc.
Paulo, and what about like payment processing platforms and those types of additional integrations?
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen integration with it. I know that Stripe, which is basically, if you don't know by the name, Strapi is one of the contributors of the project. I think they are building a plugin for that so you can integrate it with the Stripe, but I haven't seen it so far right now.
Okay.
To answer a little more to Juliet, the plugins you saw when she showed the code, this is essentially expressed with some with a lot of syntactic sugar, so you can really add almost everything you want
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that
low
was
end. This is express.
that
yeah,
was
like
gonna be my next question. Like, how much of the code would you do in the CMS versus the one that you do in the actual like VS Code or whichever is your texted?
so basically like there's a like the content manager like creating your fruits and your connection with your database and your security. You basically doesn't have you don't have to post it. Like most of the things that you do is like for example, if you see the implementation, like you can intercept like endpoints, so you can add your own logic. You can create custom queries if you need to have like custom endpoints, and basically a lot of stuff. I don't know if my window is being shared. Let me share the entire screen. But
Also,
basically, you can
yes.
modify. It's a JavaScript project. It's a node project, but they have guidelines to tell you, okay, if you want to add extend this feature, you need to modify here, you need to modify here, etc. Like I think,
All of the configuration is on is on the code. All the this is code as configuration, so you can add the entire server into how was it called, into Git, and just your changes will be added to the version control. So it's fully supported. It has full support for version control testing.
yeah, it's basically like this is basically an OJS plugin. Like the thing is that the UI allows you to build things easier, and it has APIs for building stuff that you don't need to take care of, like data access and model building. But you can configure a lot of stuff. Like you see if you go to the extension guide and the plugin guide, like they recommend you that if you need to do something like customizable, you better create a plugin, but you really don't need it. Like you can just go to the layers and add the code that you need. Like for example, I use like for example for adding an audit trail. I think that you can add a logger in you can create an interceptor so you go in each layer of a pipeline of the process, like for example creating a new item of our collection, you can add a logger that will log everything that is happening, maybe to application insights or to AWS CloudWatch. So that is not really complicated. And of course, there's also another part. Let me see if I can get it over here. Like you can set up your own endpoints. Like if you don't want to be able to like if you have a specific endpoint that is not going to be related to content, you can set it up here in routes. And this handle is supposed to point to a file to a module, for example, to a Node.js module that has a method with the name of the handle, and that way you can figure out. These ones are created automatically here because they extend of the basic controller. The controller, these methods are controller methods that you can see. You can add here. For example, if I want, I can add another method here for articles, and I create another route, and that way I can call anything I want. And there is also policy configurations, but this part is a bit complicated. Like it's like some sort of metadata that you can use to decide like what plugins are going to be integrated in the life cycle of this handling of this request, etc. But it's really like it allows you to do a lot of stuff. Like people have done a lot of stuff with it, and if many people say that the headless architecture is the future of the CMS. Like a lot of people these days are creating their systems like headless first, and then they give you like for example Strapi. Strapi gives you the headless CMS free, but if you go to the pricing page, you'll see that they come with representation layer if you pay for it on the cloud. Like it comes with a website builder similar to Squarespace and other stuff.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much, Pablo. That was very fun. I enjoyed that.
That was very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also, is there well, in the permissions, there's a way to hide objects that the user has no capacity in by permission level. So, for example,
You mean
let's
like
say
what the output or like the result of an endpoint is going to be?
more often the back in the default console, the default admin console. If there is there a way for a particular user not to see a certain object?
You mean like let me see, let me share again. You mean like here if they like do not see a collection tag?
Yeah.
I think
Exactly
you
that.
can. I think you can just restrict like someone doesn't have the permission to modify. Okay, the content type field. So here I can tell you, okay, you cannot like create content types, you cannot get connections, you cannot create components. Like here you can block someone for not being able to create content types. And you have permission by clicking. Of course here you can block them, but I don't see that you can block them by collection. Looks like you can only do it by the plugin, by features of the plugin.
I probably is that check UI availability.
I mean, this one, this says check UI availability. Yeah, but basically these, you can say like the plugins expose the permissions that they have available. Like, for example, here, like the application is the one to show like the collection, the content that you have. This is the permission for your content, like to read it, to write it, etc., etc. And then each plugin has their own permissions. It might be that you can like say, okay, I want to be able to modify the collection type of article, but I don't want to, but I want to be able to modify the other. I don't think that you can do that. I think that you can only block someone from modifying everything.
Okay, sounds fine.
But probably someone's going to make a plugin about that later. Actually, Strapi is very young. It's like it has like less than a year old since the first production version, so it's still evolving. But as you can see, it has a lot of potential as a CMS. Like, for example, right now I'm helping out a friend who has like a developer community for talks and stuff, who is making his application in the website for this page in the backend is known as Strapi, and they are doing a lot of cool stuff with it. Like, for example, they are integrating with Meetup, so they create a plugin for Meetup that you can take content that automatically creates a new event in Meetup, and that's very cool. Anything else?
I think that would be it, Paulo.
No, that's it. We're done. Well, guys, thank you for your
Thank you, Paulo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for everything.